Members of County Assembly were actually listening in to the developments happening in the court to know whether they will be required to have degrees before they're allowed to vie for elective positions. Now, this is at the back of a case at the Milimani Law Courts, as I mentioned, where MCAs and other parties have challenged the implementation of the amended Section 22A of the Elections Act that is set to take effect in next year's general election. Emmanuel Toh is following the developments. Let's listen in to this particular report he filed.
After a heated debate in the court of public opinion, it was time for the matter of MCAs and MPs degree requirement to be deliberated in the High Court, with lawyers taking each other head on.
The Constitution does not set what that qualification is.
The petitioners, through their lawyers, Professor Tom Ojenda and Charles Njenga, told the court that the amendments by Parliament were unconstitutional. The lawyers submitted that if the law were to be applied, many Kenyans would be locked out of leadership positions. They added that besides that, Kenyans would be denied their rights to elect leaders of their choice.
Allowing the mandatory requirement for a degree for elected members of the County Assembly, or as a prerequisite for election to the County Assembly, my Lord, flies in the face of the right to representation under Article 38.
The MCAs also cited the 2019 national census that shows that over 98% of Kenyans did not have university degrees, and by extension a majority of MCAs.
Because even in developed countries, my Lord, individuals are elected on the basis of their political acumen. They are elected on the basis of their competence, my Lord. But, my Lord, we cannot deny, my Lord, individuals the right to exercise their political choice.
It's our submission that the Parliament has registered against we, the people.
The lawyers in support of the amendments, however, said there was enough time for the MCAs and MPs to acquire the requisite qualifications. The ward representatives, through the County Assembly's Forum CAF, had moved to the High Court to challenge the implementation of the requirement. And in the Senate, Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen also sought to amend the section and list ability to read and write as the only requirement for a political seat.
To say that MCAs should have the same qualification as members of Parliament is not to be reasonable.
Let us be serious. You expect the chair of budget committee like Kanini Kega here, looking at budget estimates, and membership of that committee has people who have not gone beyond standard 7, standard 8.
The ruling on the matter will be made on 15th October this year. Emmanuel Toh, KTN News, Nairobi.
All right, so the ruling is set to be made in 2 weeks' time, according to that report by Emmanuel Toh. But the conversation is still rife on whether or not to implement that amended Section 22A of the Elections Act that will definitely affect members of County Assembly. And let's hear from the horse's mouth. I'm joined by the Leader of Majority in the Meru County Assembly, Victor Kareivi. Thanks for your time, and it's great to see you right here. I'd like us to begin on this particular note and looking at those submissions by the lawyers. On one side, it's all to do with the right to exercise a political choice, we the people. And on the other side, the competency question. So I'd like to know where you sit on the fence before we delve deeper into this particular debate.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I want to start by clarifying, making everybody know that at least for the case of the Meru County Assembly, we are very well endowed. We have, a number of MCAs with PhDs. We have, MCAs with master's degrees and all manner of qualifications. So as we discuss this, I'm not necessarily discussing the issue of the Meru County Assembly because even most of the other aspirants who are seeking to have, the positions of MCAs have the qualifications. But, the argument is when you go to the ballot, you need to have your right to choose whoever you'd want to represent yourself. Yeah. So when a law is there that dictates that you must have a degree, then your freedom is already curtailed, and therefore we ought to have a scenario where the electorate is given a choice between so many degree holders and probably Form 4 leavers, and then they make the decision of who they would want to represent them based on the circumstances. I have gone to parts of this country where we have serious challenges. You get to see a population where most of the population doesn't have degrees. 2% of Kenyans have at least a first degree, and therefore what we are basically saying through this law is we would want to dictate that only 2% of Kenyans can lead the rest of the population, which in my view is not necessarily correct.
But as leader of majority, aren't you worried? Because you've highlighted how the Meru County Assembly is, and I'm sure the fact that they're well-read, it might impact positively the quality of debates and submissions on the floor of the House. Aren't you worried about that particular point? Because an ability to read and write is okay, but it might impact on the processes of these county assemblies.
It's very obvious. If you elect a leader who's not gone to school, who cannot comprehend issues, then of course you're not doing yourself justice. But it should be upon the electorate to make that decision of who they would want to represent them. From my experience, if you're in the assembly and you'd want to lead, say, the budget committee, you need to at least have some basic understanding of accounting. If you'd want to to lead a committee that deals with, say, transport, it is only natural that that particular MCA ought to have some little background on matters to do with, say, roads. Probably an engineer would even be a perfect chairperson of a transport committee because it deals with a lot of works and so on and so forth. But having said that, it is still upon that voter to make that decision because they are aware, they know the roles of an MCA, and if you see your interests are best taken care of by a Form 4 leaver and leave out a PhD holder, then it's up to you really. And if you're a PhD holder, if you have so many of your degrees and you go to a race and a diploma holder beats you hands down, then probably your PhD has a problem.
Okay, so at the end of the day, are we safer as the population? And I just want you to take a look at Meru County right now, because that's where you come from. In the county assembly, you've mentioned the PhDs and all that. Does it impact positively in terms of representation, according to where you sit? Or there are high-performing MCAs who are doing better than those with PhDs and these doctorates? What's your take on that?
It's a complex issue because from the Meru County Assembly, where we have 45 wards, at least 3 of the MCAs have PhDs. We have others who've probably lesser qualifications, but listening to the general voters, there is every likelihood that some of those who've barely gotten a certificate, probably a diploma, could be performing way better than those who have higher qualifications. So it's a very complex issue, and it's a case-by-case issue because we are different. Some of the leadership qualities are not necessarily learned in school. So there could be born leaders, I would say, and therefore, whereas I am not underestimating the role of education to any individual, I'm only saying that education only is not enough to gauge on the leadership capabilities of an individual. And I've in the past argued that if in this country we paid more attention on contents of, say, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, probably we would be getting more credible leaders than we are currently getting.
Okay. So I also assume what you're trying to say is integrity does not go hand in hand with education qualifications as well.
True. I mean, we've seen holders of PhDs, very, very learned fellas, even lawyers, getting arraigned in courts because of their questionable characters. But again, this is so complex because you can't purely argue on the basis of, when an individual who's gone to school is arraigned in court, I mean, you cannot generalize. Yeah, so that's why I would want to leave this issue to the individual wards. We have 1,450 wards in this country. Let every ward make their own decisions, but of course, let's get some basic requirements, say some Form 4 education. For me, that would be great. But having said that, whichever way the courts rules, we would be happy. We would have nothing to do. We would have to comply with the law.
True. And it's all to do with better service delivery to the people. And perhaps that leads me to the next question. Roughly 10 years down the devolution journey, and perhaps criticism is usually fronted at county assemblies at times. And just like Parliament is described as an appendage of the executive due to some of the laws and legislations they've passed, I think this criticism is equally forwarded to some county assemblies within these 47 devolved units. They bow to the whims of the governors who control the passes. So at the end of the day, in your evaluation of county assemblies and the impact, what they were envisioned to do and what they're actually doing, are we getting it right 10 years down the line?
I mean, I would largely argue that, with devolution, many things that have happened, across the country. It's there for everybody to see. Of course, much more could have happened if certain things were done a little differently. The independence of the county assemblies can only be guaranteed if we have more facilitation, that comes directly to the county assemblies. As it is, any monies that are paid to the county assemblies has to go through the executive. So the finance CEC has to approve of any spending by the county assembly, including, the salaries and everything, So if you don't have that financial independence, it is so unlikely that you will be as independent as the Constitution may have envisaged. And one of the proposals that were excellent in the proposed BBI report was the creation of the ward fund, similar to, say, the CDF, where an MCA would be in charge of a fund, a specific kitty that that you'd use to develop the ward. As it is now, a few counties like Meru, we have an informal ward fund where the governor, out of his discretion, decides that I will give the counties the wards some 10 million. Initially it was 20 million, but there is no law. So if you have to literally beg from a governor, then your freedom of speaking out your mind sometimes getting curtailed. And that's why you see some of the MCAs across the country will always want to sing praises to governors, to the executive, so that things on the ground can work out, so that projects can land in their wards. Failure to which, they will be branded as the rebels, and things won't work the way it is. So, the way it's supposed to work. So, if things work well, an ideal situation would be to have the county assemblies controlling their own budgets, and two, having enough funds devolved to the ward level where the governor has minimal control, or actually no control whatsoever, on what happens with the ward fund. Just like the president has probably no control of what happens with the CDF. That's why you see at the national level, you have Kieleweke, you have Tangatanga. They are members of parliament who don't see eye to eye with the president, but they have been busy executing projects in their own constituencies.
Is there any legislation to put this into effect to perhaps, facilitate the independence of these county assemblies, now that we know the BBI faced a couple of headwinds in the courts of law? Is there any legislation currently ongoing?
We've had proposals. I've seen Council of Governors, particularly the governor of Meru and a few other governors coming together and insisting that whereas the BBI proposals had their issues with the courts and, with some, quite a number of Kenyans, there are some extractions that can be done from that particular document and implemented. We don't need a referendum, for instance, to have the word development bill. Sure. The parliament has had these bills shelved for a very long time. And that's why we've been appealing even to the presidential hopefuls to rally their troops in parliament, in Senate, in support of these particular bills, because they're there, they've been ready. I think Senator Kangata at some point had, all these worked out. But unfortunately, the national parliament, for whatever reasons, didn't see the urgency of passing that law. And the competition that has previously happened between MPs and MCAs is probably partly to blame, because when an MCA is empowered, unfortunately, some MPs see it as a challenge. They see, the next elections, probably this MCA will be competing against me, so let me not be part of those who are empowering this member of county assembly to have the word fund kitty. So all these issues are to blame for the situation we find ourselves in. Okay. So going forward, I would advocate for our members of parliament, our senators, to be a little more truthful. Let's see leaders who are not just thinking about the next elections. Mm-hmm. Let's see leaders who are thinking about posterity. Let's not think about, let's always remember that we won't be in these positions forever. That's my argument.
Okay, well noted. And speaking of these positions, and I'd just like to take a look at the journey of devolution so far. You being a member of County Assembly, quite experienced as well. As we formed these devolved units, it was envisioned that they're meant to evolve into semi-autonomous economic units, perhaps capable of even championing their own development, drivers and indicators, and even pay a fraction of the recurrent wage bill that these counties face. But 10 years down the line, we barely have counties that are able to just meet the salary expenditure, or perhaps without looking to the exchequer on the national government. What's your take on this particular issue when it comes to talking about own source revenue? Where are we not getting it right?
I would say generally the economy of this country has not been doing very well. We've had a very difficult, 5-10 years of devolution. And when the economy of the nation is not doing well, then it is unlikely that the county governments will do as any better. But still, having said that, in some of the counties, we've seen runaway corruption. We've seen some counties lacking capacity to collect revenue, and account for the revenue. And the overdependence of the national treasury is also an issue. So I would be thinking about a future where the counties are more empowered. More of the taxes, first of all, are channeled to the counties so that we build capacity. It's an issue of capacity because the moment you just, have the 47 counties and most of the taxes are collected centrally, it would be wrong to expect the counties to perform, to collect any other revenue. If KRA is centralized, for instance, and that's the main body that collects revenue, I don't know why we would be expecting the counties to come up with so many other levies overburdening the common mwananchi, so that they can be self-sustaining. Only very few counties can sustain themselves. Probably, say, Narok, because probably of, say, Masai Mara, when tourism is doing well. A few others like Mombasa, because of the tourism activities there.
Okay.
Nairobi, well managed, which we haven't seen for the last 10 years, unfortunately.
Sure.
So it will take a long time before counties, have the capacity to sustain themselves, even the wages. I mean, so, and you see, when you devolve so many functions, like the health, and, the counties are expecting to pay all the clinicians or the nurses or the doctors, get all the hospitals up and running, and you expect them to still have spare money to pay all these people and, again, manage themselves. It would be expecting too much.
All right.
So a lot needs to be done at the national level. First of all, we need to start with that devolving of at least the 35% to the counties.
Okay.
And now, once they have the 35%, then you can start expecting to see them activate their revenue-generating, initiatives at every county. Without that, then I would say their capacity, as it is really not adequate.
Okay. Even as we talk about devolving more funds, we'll definitely want to talk about the runaway corruption, because it seems we just did devolve functions from the national government. Corruption as well was devolved into the county governments. And with your role of oversight, I think I'll put you on the hot seat in terms of what county assemblies are doing to stop this particular vice that is running coffers dry across various counties. Victor Karidhi is with us. I'd like us to take a short break. He's the leader of majority in Meru County, and we'll be back with more information to do with this journey called devolution, even as we await for that particular ruling that is set to be handed over in 2 weeks' time regarding Section 22A of the Elections Act, whether MCAs should have degrees or not in order to vie for those particular seats. Stay with us.